Oh, you don't think so? Or maybe you agree with me. Well, either way, I'm about to prove to you that the Monkey Island series only has good games. I don't personally know a lot of series you could say that for. It's even more impressive considering the first game released in 1990, and the gap between the most recent games was 13 years. How could a series with 6 games that released over 32 years with multiple different companies taking charge result in oops all bangers? Well, I'm gonna tell you. Here's how it's gonna go. We're gonna revisit each game with a short summary of the story, gameplay, and other notable information. A lot of charm comes from the humor and characters of each game, so I'm gonna make sure to mention what recurring characters are up to each time we see them. That's it, that's the video. You in? You're darn right you're in. Let's find out what is the secret of Monkey Island and prove that you can love all these games even if you're from Thailand. The Secret of Monkey Island released in 1990. It was a big deal at the time for many reasons. First off, its gameplay. Point-and-click style games were still pretty rough at the time, and LucasArts was one of the pioneers of what we know the genre to be today. The game Maniac Mansion was released a bit before Monkey Island, which was their big game that used the SCUM engine. SCUM stands for Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion, and was created by the man behind Monkey Island, Ron Gilbert. While this engine was heavily focused on different verbs to select an action for your character, it eventually evolved to the simplified version we see in Loom, and then also another more common form in Monkey Island, of course. Secondly, the graphics. Seeing as I just mentioned Loom, I guess we can discuss that first. Loom was released the same year as Monkey Island, and it saw the first real advancement in pixel art. No one really did pixel art in games like LucasArts did, mostly due to hardware limitations. LucasArts discovered a way to use the program Deluxe Paint to the SCUM engine, which allowed for some beautiful art like this. Loom and Monkey Island both have incredible works of art that were huge advancements in the point-and-click genre for their time. The music. If you've never heard the music from the series, especially the first game, please go listen to it. Not a bad song in the bunch. Tons of later songs in the series are based on the music here, if that's any indication how immediately catchy and iconic it was. Don't worry, there's definitely some playing in the background right now. Unless it's copyrighted. Finally, there was a level of charm and personality that even to this day games fail to reach. While there are some very funny jokes, ultimately the fans of the series absolutely love the characters the most. And who better to start with than Guybrush Threepwood. If you are unfamiliar with the series, I did not just read a jumble of letters in a random sequence. That is the name of the main character. The origins behind his name are probably the most well-known piece of trivia from the series, but I feel like I should probably just explain them in case you are curious. The Deluxe Paint software used the term brush for sprites, so when discussing the name for the main character, Ron Gilbert asked what they should name the Guy Brush. The team said yes, and then they immediately moved on. I've actually always been more curious about what his last name came from, and apparently it's from a book called The Brinkmanship of Galahad Threepwood. Anyways, yes, Guybrush is the playable character that you follow through the series. He is a very charming Guybrush, and wants to become a pirate, despite being very naive, childish, soft, weak, easily spooked, and daft. It probably doesn't help that nobody respects his silly name, resulting in a ton of mispronunciations. Some of my favorites include Geekwood, Gorbush, Sheephood, and Peep Crud. However, he is pretty resourceful, and it would be hard to find a more determined Guybrush. You are dropped on Melee Island, a place you'll be pretty well acquainted to as the series progresses. After talking to the lookout, Guybrush heads to the SCUM bar. He is told once he completes 3 trials, he'll become a pirate master. Finally, you are put into the gameplay of Monkey Island with the most classic point-and-click action you can get your hands on. Collecting items, talking to townsfolk, and solving puzzles are all necessary to completing your trials. On this mission, you meet a few very important characters, the first one being the Voodoo Lady. She is all-knowing and seemingly all-powerful. If you're ever stuck, you might want to have a chat with the Voodoo Lady. She surprisingly doesn't do a whole lot in this first game, but the House of Mojo TM and herself will assuredly return. Next up is Otis, the poor guy who ended up in jail for picking flowers. He also doesn't do a whole lot here, but he will be part of your crew in the second act of this game. Then we have Governor Elaine Marley. After putting her dogs to sleep, we get to meet her, and Guybrush immediately swoons for her. While she says I seem nice, ultimately I don't have what it takes to become a pirate. Well, we'll show her. Meat Hook is pretty cool. He lost both of his hands to the Beast and is struggling to get his painting career afloat. He is the second member of our crew later on. Well, who's this snazzy looking fellow? Meet Stan, the used ship salesman. We need a ship to become a pirate, so he's the guy to get one from. I just can't get over how charming that Guybrush was. Hopefully we'll get to see him again soon. Finally, we have Carla the Swordmaster. To prove we have what it takes to sword fight, we must beat her. We're also introduced to the concept of sword fighting, which is actually entirely based on insults. Pull off the ultimate insults against your opponents and you win the fight. Carla also is our third and final crew member. Some other small important details are that Guybrush can breathe underwater for 10 minutes, we find the secret of Melee Island, a t-shirt, and we complete the 3 trials and get our crew in our ship. Oh yeah, and Governor Marley has been kidnapped by who? Oh, you know, just the ghost pirate LeChuck! Yep, that's right, the big bad is none other than a ghost pirate set on marrying the governor. We're gonna have to get on his ghost ship to defeat him. That means we must travel to Monkey Island. Guybrush's crew get lazy, so he makes a potion for himself to arrive on Monkey Island. Too bad he doesn't have the ship anymore. There we meet Herman Toothrot, a man who is also stranded on Monkey Island and has since lost his mind. We also meet some cannibals, but honestly I'm only mentioning them because we will see them again in another game. The mission is to enter the giant monkey head, travel through hell, and reach the ghost ship. All we need is to get a root so we can make an anti-root ghost brew TM to kill LeChuck once and for all. Sadly, LeChuck is all the way back on Melee Island. However, Herman Toothrot had a ship this whole time, and we use it to travel back and stop the wedding. Governor Marley is no damsel in distress though, and she arrives with her own anti-ghost root brew TM to kill LeChuck. Guybrush ruins her plan, so LeChuck immediately punches Guybrush into the sky, losing his brew in the process. However, a conveniently placed grog machine spits out a root beer that we can use to kill LeChuck and save the day. We share a nice moment with Elaine and finish the game. The story is super fun, the puzzles are challenging yet rewarding, and the ending fight is pretty awesome. I never found any puzzles to be impossible to solve, and a lot of the gimmicks like insult sword fighting I found to be pretty fun. Otherwise, in terms of gameplay, it's kind of hard to go in depth. I realize this whole concept is me attempting to convince you that all these games hold up, but the puzzles would take forever to explain. I've always been more in it for the characters, humor, and story anyways, and the puzzles are just a fun way to get through that. I love every character I've met so far, and I'm really rooting for Elaine and Guybrush. Get it? Rooting? As for last minute details, the only important story aspect is that our crew was left stranded due to our poor captaining. I want to point out my personal connection to the game now that we finished it. Not only did I first play this game in early 2022, but I played the remake that came out in 2009. While the pixel art is beautiful, I personally adore the style they chose for the newer version. It's an amazing way to stylize the pixel look, and overlaying one scene from the original with the remake shows just how faithful it is. As we cover the second game, I'm going to use the remastered version for the visuals. I wanted to make sure to start with the classic look, but give a glimpse at what I played as well. Plus the second game looks pretty similar, so you aren't missing out. The reason I played it last year was I got a new laptop after having a crappy computer that can't run games my whole life. Want to know how crappy my computer is? While typing the sentence, my browser crashed because it can't handle Google Docs. It can't handle words on a page. When it closed, I said, "You're a loser. You are an absolute loser," referring to my computer, of course. Enough about me though. I love point and click games so much I just looked up lists of the best one and started playing through them. Monkey Island was, of course, always towards the top, but something about the name always put me off. I played Day of the Tentacle, Broken Sword, The Neverhood, and Broken Age. Finally, out of games to try, I decided to download Monkey Island. I am so happy that I did. Okay, Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge Time. It released in 1991, just 1 year after the original. The only thing I know about this game development-wise is they immediately began working on this game as soon as they finished the first. Like, as soon as possible. The game wasn't even being sold yet. Apparently they wanted to begin before seeing if it sold well just in case it didn't, so they could make a sequel regardless. We should definitely start with our main character Guybrush and what's changed since defeating LeChuck. He's become a bit of a legend now, even though nobody believes him when he tells them he's the Guybrush that beat LeChuck. He's a best-selling author with notable titles such as When I Blew Up LeChuck, Where I Blew Up LeChuck, Why I Blew Up LeChuck, and The Time I Blew Up LeChuck. Although that last one is only questionable memoirs. Guybrush these days feels like he needs to accomplish something big after nailing his first adventure, the legendary treasure of Big Whoop. The game actually starts with Guybrush holding this treasure but having no way to climb back up. We see Elaine ask him how he ended up like this, and the flashback begins. This adventure starts with Scab Island rather than Melee Island, which means we get a ton of new characters and locales. Unfortunately, there aren't too many notable faces here. Well, almost. I suppose Largo Legrand is our secondary antagonist this time around, who has placed a Largo embargo TM on this island that prevents anyone from leaving. Obviously our first quest is to lift that embargo. Let's go catch up with the Voodoo Lady, who has conveniently moved her house of Mojo TM to Scab Island. As the Voodoo Lady, she gives us plans for the voodoo doll of Largo. She also hates Largo's embargo TM, so all works out just swell. While we are torturing Largo with our voodoo doll, we taunt him with LeChuck's beard, which he swipes to reanimate LeChuck. Why would he do that? We meet up with Captain Dread to search for the 4 pieces of the map to Big Whoop. The other islands we can visit are named Fat and Booty. On our travels, we reunite with none other than Stan, the used coffin salesman. Sadly, Stan talks too much, so we put him in a coffin and nail down the cover. I guess that's the end of Stan. Hopefully he left me that cool jacket in his will.
Excuse me, friend. Be there in a minute.
Then we dress up and go to this Mardi Gras party thrown by none other than Governor Elaine Marley TM herself. We almost get Elaine back, but ultimately our flirting fails and we go our separate ways. We gotta get Elaine back, we just gotta. After finding out the map pieces, we bring them to the only important new character, Wally the Cartographer. He is a wizard at making maps, but before he can, he is taken by Largo. We soon discover the fortress of the now zombified ghost pirate LeChuck TM. After being captured, we attempt to save Wally, but instead light a match in a room full of TNT and blow up the joint. The explosion sends Guybrush all the way to Dinky Island, where we reunite with Herman Tooth Rot. Thankfully, Dinky Island is home to the treasure of Big Whoop, which we get stuck trying to recover, meet up with Elaine, and explain the plot of the game to her. After the explanation, Guybrush falls and lands in an underground facility alongside LeChuck. Here we get another final boss puzzle, which is much more elaborate than the first game was. This is really the start of my hate of these final bosses. It's going to be a recurring thing in the later games as well, where you have to try to solve a puzzle while constantly getting beat up and moved around by LeChuck. I find it annoying and have not once enjoyed this style of gameplay. That's really the only thing I dislike about the game. Anyways, let's finish out the story here. We make a voodoo doll of LeChuck. We learn that LeChuck is your brother. I see you, Lucasfilms. And after defeating LeChuck, we remove his mask, revealing the face of your brother Chucky. A worker tells you both to get out, referring to us both as kids. We walk out as children at a theme park and leave with our parents. While this would be a pretty annoying twist in my eyes, thankfully Chucky gives an evil look to the camera, showing that there might be some trickery afoot. There's also an ending scene where Elaine hopes Guybrush is okay. Aww. LeChuck's revenge showed that these characters can change, grow, and also might not be real, I guess? I prefer to see the world of Monkey Island as a real thing with characters who are actually pirates and ghosts and stuff. This topic will be back later on, of course, but the next few sequels basically treat it as a real world, which I'm thankful for. Some people like the sequel more than the original, and I can't blame them. The gameplay and graphics are identical, so it's almost an extension of the original game. It's hard not to love both, although I think I still personally prefer the original. Still, this was an incredible sequel and was sure to lead to an amazing series. However, the creator Ron Gilbert saw this as the ending of his story, and new project leaders were in charge of the next game. So let's see what happened. The Curse of Monkey Island released in 1997, 6 years after the last game. For the first time, the graphic style was completely shifted to a more traditional 2D drawn style, and for the last time we have the Scum engine being used. So while the gameplay is virtually the same, the game feels entirely different because of the graphics. This was also the first game to have voice acting, but since I played the special editions of the first 2 games, I was already used to the characters and their voices. I think they nailed Guybrush, Elaine, and LeChuck's voices, honestly. And I must agree considering they kept them virtually the same, although Elaine and LeChuck had a few changes in voice actors. The story drops Guybrush on the open seat in a bumper car, tying to the ending of the previous game without really addressing how he got there. I honestly think they might have been at a loss of how to fix that ending, or agreed with me in that it just kinda sucked. He ends up in the middle of a fight between Zombie LeChuck TM and Governor Elaine Marley TM. LeChuck is trying to marry Elaine once again, but Elaine misses Guybrush and obviously hates LeChuck. Guybrush cruises in, surprising them both, but LeChuck captures him and puts him in the hold. Hey, it's Wally. I guess he became part of LeChuck's crew after we blew him up and abandoned him. Honestly, I don't blame him. After making fun of Wally's new name, Bloodnose TM, we blow up some skellies with one lone head surviving. He calls himself Murray, but Guybrush pushes him into the water to sink and moves on with the mission. LeChuck has a voodoo plan in action, but Guybrush foils him and LeChuck accidentally gets voodooed himself, leaving a smoking pair of boots behind. As the ship is sinking, Guybrush finds a diamond ring in the hold and brings it out to Plunder Island, where Elaine is waiting for him. As they share a tender moment, Guybrush pops the question and... she said yes. This is so amazing. My ship has finally sailed. I'm gonna... Wait, that ring isn't cursed or anything, is it? Well, it is. So Elaine attempts to punch Guybrush but turns to solid gold in the process. How can they get married now? I guess the mission is to set her free. As per usual, the voodoo lady has set up shop on his island, and as we make our way we see a familiar face. Or I guess not really a face, but kinda just a head. That Murray guy is being used as a decoration. That's cool, I suppose. Talking to the voodoo lady, she informs us that we need a ring of equal or greater value to save Elaine. She also is relieved to know that Guybrush hid his solid gold fiancé so she wouldn't get stolen by pirates. Guybrush did do that, right? Guybrush did not do that, so we have to rescue her on Blood Island. Getting off of Plunder Island is its own mission, with tons of kooky characters, but honestly none of them are important enough to discuss. I'm only going to bring up these pirate barbers who become your crew on your ship. On your ship, we have to sword fight our way to the final boss for a map to Blood Island. Sword fighting has evolved from our first adventure, however, and now you must rhyme your insults for them to have any impact. I honestly think the rhyming aspect makes it a bit more fun. However, this section of the game is extremely tedious. You must collect insults, fight pirates, and upgrade your ship one bit at a time. I think the idea was sound, but it was executed pretty poorly. Long story short, we get our map and must now get our ring from Blood Island. Elaine is thankfully safe, and as we visit the cemetery on our travels, we come across a familiar coffin. Obviously, Guybrush opens it and is greeted by none other than Stan, the life insurance salesman. Faking our death causes Stan to owe us all of his money, screwing him over once again. We also see the cannibals again. There, I mentioned it. Long story short, we get a ring and replace the cursed one, allowing Elaine to finally give Guybrush the punch he deserves. Their reunion is cut short by a group of skeleton pirates, as it is revealed that LeChuck is back. This guy just can't be killed, huh? Him and Bowser would surely get along. LeChuck is looking a bit more fiery now, and brings him back to the carnival we apparently escaped from after the ending of the second game. I guess I do kind of address it, although we never see that actually take place. This is especially addressed after being turned into a child once again. We chat with Murray the Skull one final time before becoming a big boy again and going to this game's version of the final boss. This time it takes place on a roller coaster to hell that is themed with their past adventures, allowing a couple more characters to get referenced like Herman Toothrot. Elaine, in typical fashion, escapes on her own, and we blow up the roller coaster, trapping LeChuck inside. Also, Wally was in there, so he gets blown up and left behind for the second time in a row. Now for the best part. Elaine and Guybrush finally get married. I told myself I wasn't gonna cry, but this honestly feels like a pretty nice ending to the story, but of course I would love to see the newlywed couple's adventures. Thankfully, I will get to do just that very soon. I honestly think the animations and story are really nice here. It's certainly a different type of charm, but not a bad one by any means. Puzzles are still really fun in my opinion, and I continue to enjoy the story of Guybrush, Elaine, and LeChuck. Murray was also an instant fan favorite, which I definitely agree with. I know just from this video that seems confusing, but he has a really entertaining voice, and his personality is a skull who can't move or do much of anything, but is extremely cocky and vows revenge on Guybrush and all of his enemies. I can't wait to reunite with him, but I have to wonder just how does this guy get around. Anyways, that's really about it for the third entry. Let me show you just how ambitious they got for the next one. Escape from Monkey Island released in 2000, just 3 years after the last one. This game also had completely different designers in charge, which leads to a lot of strange changes. I'm guessing you might have already noticed the Toy Story looking art style we have going on. Yes, this is their attempt to make a 3D Monkey Island game. I think right away this threw me off, as I wholly prefer the look of the original games. This change also leads to some gameplay limitations as well. A lot of the environments look a lot more bare than in the earlier games. I think a good example of this would be a comparison of the Scum Bar in the old games versus the newest one. It feels much more lifeless, although it looks like they tried a bit to spruce it up. I think the characters look significantly worse as well. Elaine and Guybrush almost look like completely different characters, and when they reintroduce you to someone like Otis, it is impossible to know that without the game telling you. Alright, let's move on to the story. We open on the couple's honeymoon, which of course involves pirate antics. There's a bit of a walkthrough for the controls, which is smart considering it's brand new to the series. We then return once again to Melee Island, where we find out everyone assumes we are dead, and Elaine needs to run for mayor again as she wants her home back. She is running against Charles L. Charles. And if you know anything about how names work, then you may have realized that close friends of Charles L. Charles might call him Chuck LeChuck. Guybrush needs to travel to a different island, which means we once again need a crew. We reunite with Otis and Carla, who escaped from Monkey Island but are not too happy with you for abandoning them. We also get a new navigator, Ignatius Cheese. We get our ship, the Dainty Lady, and head to Lucre Island. Here we discovered that Elaine's grandfather kept the deed to the mansion in a safety deposit box, as well as a treasure even bigger than Big Whoop, called the Ultimate Insult TM. From there, quite a bit of nonsense happens, and the quickest way to explain it is that a man named Pegnose Pete dresses up as Guybrush and frames him, sending him to jail. We find out his boss, Ozzy Mandrill, hates pirates and wants the Ultimate Insult TM for himself so he can put an end to all pirates in the Caribbean. Once returning to Melee, LeChuck reveals he also wants the Ultimate Insult TM and is winning over the island and will be mayor very soon. We head to see the Voodoo Lady, who apparently has once again set up shop on Melee Island, and again, long story short, we are led towards Jambalaya Island. I also have to mention Meat Hook is back again, but doesn't contribute a whole lot. Still going for the painting career, huh? Jambalaya is home to the pieces of the Ultimate Insult as well as some more familiar faces.
Can't get enough of my sweet coffee goodness, can ya?
Just get me my Grogachino, please?
First up is Murray, who is the greeter of a restaurant themed after Guybrush himself. Sadly, even as a celebrity, he can't get a free meal. And then there's Stan, the timeshare salesman as well. What, you thought he was a used coffin salesman? And you thought he was a life insurance salesman? I honestly don't have the slightest clue as to what you mean. After collecting the pieces for the very cool looking Ultimate Insult TM, we return to our mansion, only to be greeted by the new governor and his VG Mandrill. Mandrill was the one to rescue him from his demise in the previous game, and now they are working together to end piracy once and for all. To get Guybrush out of the picture, they leave him on none other than Monkey Island. Oh, now I get the title.
Do you have any idea how difficult it is to escape from Monkey Island?
No. How difficult is it to?
Escape from Monkey Island.
Well, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
We meet up with Herman Toothrot and restore his memory, only to discover that he is Elaine's grandfather. Now we get to a rough part. The evolution of sword fighting continues as we get to the art of monkey combat. Basically, it's glorified rock, paper, scissors, but with 2 times the items. Each move is weak to 2 others, and is strong to 2 others. In order to change which move you are doing, you must memorize a pattern of monkey noises that allow you to do so. It basically means writing gibberish on a piece of paper every time a monkey moves, because learning the language of a monkey is insanely unintuitive. I really disliked monkey combat and is by far the worst part of this game. Anyways, mastering it allows you to enter the giant monkey head and discover it's actually part of a giant monkey robot. That is certainly something. I don't like that. We foil the enemy's plan so LeChuck becomes a giant statue and we begin our last fight in monkey combat. You'd think the goal would be to win like usual, right? Wrong, you have to lose, obviously. I hate that so much. We kill Ozzy, LeChuck, and the Ultimate Insult TM blow up, and Elaine's grandfather becomes the governor once again, so Guybrush and Elaine can live out their days as pirates. What a nice ending. This was without a doubt extremely rough to get through. I don't find a ton of charm in the 3D style, a lot of jokes don't land, the characters seem really different, and tons of puzzles and gameplay elements are either bad or hindered by the graphics style. There were a lot of times where I was completely lost, including the final boss. So yeah, this might be a C-tier game, but bad? I don't know, I don't really think so. Ultimately, if you want another Monkey Island game, you sure got it. There's a lot here with tons of story developments, new funny characters, and old returning ones. There are plenty of elements and puzzles I still like, just not anywhere near the first 3 games. So fine, we had a meh one, but we're not done yet. Let's see what was next. Tales of Monkey Island released in 2009, except it was a bit different this time around. Mostly because this is a Telltale game. That's right, if you've seen the Walking Dead game, or maybe the Game of Thrones game, maybe even that Batman game, they are all in the similar style. Telltale games are episodic, where each episode is released on their own but tying together with the other parts due to an overarching narrative. On the original Windows version, it released about an episode a month, which I find to be extremely impressive. The new game director was Dave Grossman, who also returns for the final entry in the series currently.
Grossman, that guy again?
While you may be thinking that Telltale ruled in the style of gameplay people love from the Monkey Island series, I'd argue you'd be wrong. There is no Elaine will remember that going on, and instead Telltale seems to have attempted to adapt the point-and-click genre fully for this title. It feels pretty similar to the other games, just separated in 5 sections and being a little more dialogue heavy. Let's talk graphics. This game came out 9 years after the previous 3D attempt, and I honestly think it looks great. I think the character designs are also much better, for the most part.
Dark Ninja Dave! Dark Ninja Dave!
Guybrush, for example, looks great to me, while Elaine is still a little rough. The animations and personality of this game feel really great too, and the cartoony style of the environment fits really well with those early Monkey Island games. Otherwise, music, gameplay, all of that is pretty good. let's go over the first episode. We start on a battle with LeChuck and need to assemble the cursed cutlass of Gaflu TM to get rid of the ghost pirate once and for all. We improvise with the ingredients a bit and Guybrush stabs LeChuck. If only we knew at the time that this one action would cause the entire conflict of the next 4 episodes. Instead of killing LeChuck, it takes all the voodoo evil out of him and returns him to his human form. The evil moves to Guybrush's hand, becoming a pox and giving the hand a mind of its own. The ship explodes and Guybrush is sent to Flotsam Island, a place so windy no one can leave. Flotsam ends up being a little too important in the story, so you really get used to the first few locations here. There's a bar, a glass melting shop, a laboratory, and a forest. We are told to find someone named Deep Gut, who is actually just the voodoo lady. How convenient. She informs us of the pox of LeChuck that is now spreading to pirates all over the island, as well as our next MacGuffin, La Esponja Grande. No, I am not bad at pronouncing Spanish words, this is a joke in the game, don't worry. The lab is home to Le Marquis de Sange. I hate French. Who wants to experiment on Guybrush. This would be fine if he didn't famously kill and maim patients. See, I always hate French people for a reason, it's not my fault they all have evil tendencies. Once we escape from his lab, the Marquis calls up a famous pirate bounty hunter known as Morgan Le Flay. More on that later. In other French-hating news, the Marquis also created a wind control device to keep pirates on the island so he would have subjects forever. A series of puzzles that I found extremely clever and entertaining leads us to shutting down the device and leaving the island with our new first mate Reginald Van Winslow. Unfortunately, the winds were keeping the pox at bay, but it has now spread across the Caribbean. Now we get to the insane part of the story. We spot Elaine on another ship who seems to be getting along a little too well with LeChuck. What is this setting up? Does the implication of Elaine falling for human LeChuck mean our OTP is going to split? I really couldn't believe they would do that, but I'm sitting here watching it happen. Poor Guybrush, I hope... Wait a second. Oh, I see what's happening. A really hot new girl shows up at a very convenient time. Honestly, I got a new ship to root for. Episode 1 ends there, and I think they really nailed the opening act. It was pretty long, like as long as the first game maybe. If you want a ton of Monkey Island action, this game must have been a real delight. I know I was hooked when I first played it. Not only are the puzzles really clever and fun to solve, but there are a pretty limited amount of characters and locations to visit, resulting in the player easily identifying their next step. I also like the story so far, though I'm not the biggest fan of the Marquis. Yeah, I hate the French and all, but I just don't find him to be a fun villain like LeChuck is. And, spoiler alert, but he is the secondary villain, so let's hope he improves a bit. Alright, episode 2. The bounty hunter Morgan Le Flay is the girl on Guybrush's ship, who turns out to be his biggest fan. She has a job to do, however, so they sword fight until she actually cuts Guybrush's hand off. I really wasn't expecting that to happen. She has what she needs, so she takes his hand and skedaddles. Guybrush immediately gets a hook hand, which honestly makes him feel more like a pirate than ever. Now all he needs is a peg leg, eye patch, and shoulder parrot. Our next stop is the Jerkbait Islands, home to some disgusting, just truly awful looking merfolk. I hate them. Also, Elaine is here. Guybrush tries to ask her about LeChuck, but she notices he's missing his hand and his wedding ring. Convenient? Want more? She takes off her wedding ring and gives it to Guybrush. I was so shocked at this point. They are really going to split them up with some new love interests. Wow. On the other island, we meet LeChuck, who is now just a friendly himbo. He wants to solve a puzzle just like us. How cute. The rest of the story is gathering items to summon a guide to La Esponja Grande. The guides are these ancient sea creatures, who I honestly can't decide if they have a worse design than the merfolk or not. Elaine decides to stay back with LeChuck, of course, that cheating freak, and Morgan boards their ship once again. The Marquis hires her to bring all of Guybrush back this time. She's about to get away with it too, when a giant meddling manatee swallows their ship whole. Episode 2 is a lot weaker than the first, but thankfully I was already hooked, so it's okay. I didn't enjoy the puzzles a whole lot, I didn't like the characters a ton, but I like where it's headed now. I also am getting excited about Guybrush getting with Le Flay instead of the manatee, so let's make it happen. We are now inside the belly of the beast, with an explorer named Coronado de Cava. He is an ex of the voodoo lady and is jealous of a relationship. What does Guybrush say to convince him? His wife is here. Guess who's actually here? Yep, my new wife, Morgan. She gets knocked out and we uncomfortably search her body for clues of her past. Then in the newlywed game, we sound like a stalker, knowing every single detail about her and convincing DeCava to trust us. Our first mate Winslow also shows us the effects of the pox of LeChuck, getting irrationally angry at the slightest inconveniences. So he stays in the boat as we explore the stomach. DeGava's crew is there too, except they removed themselves from him. One is a Skelly who looks like Murray, but I guess that's just a bit of stereotyping, huh? Well, good thing Murray is actually here, and we even get to put his head on the other body and earn a full talking friend for our team. We also have to gain the trust of these other guys, one with a silly face contest and the other by giving him a date with Morgan. Morgan also sees what a loser Guybrush is and is no longer a fan of his. Guess we'll have to show her our moves. What do we got? Oh, we use laxatives on the narwhal so we can get out of there? Pretty slick, Guybrush. She's wrapped around your finger now for sure. The ending has you attempt to get two manatees to mate by using pickup lines on her. Wow. This is also when Morgan reveals that she is very similar to the male manatee, avoiding love but trying to be independent, but willing to open her heart to the right guy. If you had any doubts about this relationship before, they have to be gone by now. Guybrush briefly swaps body with the Voodoo Lady too. I thought that was a fun idea. We get La Esponja Grande, which turns out to be an ironic title, and Morgan betrays us and knocks Guybrush out.
Oh, like all these people had something to do with it.
I thought the body venture was pretty fun. This one heavily involved relationships with other characters, but thankfully still based all of that on puzzle solving. There are some fun parts, as well as a manatee mating part, but overall I enjoyed it a lot. As I mentioned before, Flotsam Island is important, and the entirety of episode 4 also takes place there. Before the Marquis can take us, Guybrush gets sent to jail for all the bad things he did, especially the last time he was here. Stan the Prosecutor is here to put us behind bars, while the whole island's inhabitants are infected with the pox, including the judge. We find Morgan at the bar, getting drunk and being depressed. Guybrush doesn't forgive her, so she stays there and wallows. Guybrush clears his name and escapes jail. Then, Elaine arrives. Awkward. She's got the pox bad and is mad at everything, including the scent of another woman on Guybrush. Oh no, she didn't. I saw you flirting in episode 1, girl. But this confused me. She came to rescue Guybrush and is fighting Morgan for me. At this point I was convinced we were getting divorced, but suddenly brought back to them for sure staying together. I showed you the evidence. The game is trying to mess with me. That's just wrong, man. So yeah, the girls fight, that's a fun part. We attempt to cure Elaine with La Esponja Grande, but it doesn't work. LeChuck arrives as well, informing the audience that the pox is caused by none other than the Voodoo Lady? Wow, this game really likes messing with our main cast. She's been nothing but helpful so far. Could she really have evil intentions? Guybrush feels betrayed, but the Voodoo Lady claims she was only playing her part. The Marquis runs from his lab, and we enter on one of the crazy scenes I could never have expected. Morgan Le Fay with a sword through her heart. She had gone to get his hand back and dies in the process. God, why couldn't Guybrush and Morgan end up together? I'm pissed! The Marquis is target number 1 now, and he traps Guybrush and Elaine with the intent of killing us and spreading the pox. We of course foil his plans, and he dies instead. La Esponja Grande finally goes grande and cures the pox for good. LeChuck arrives to free Guybrush and Elaine, but actually just stabs Guybrush. Yep, this is the story of how the Guybrush dies. I think Telltale is just obsessed with killing famous characters, honestly. LeChuck had tricked them into thinking he was good and planned to use La Esponja Grande for control of all pirates, and especially Elaine. Well, that one really messed with the story. Multiple character deaths, including our main character, and like 4 different twists. It's a bit much, honestly. I like when LeChuck is evil, but I think it maybe should have been that he was really good for a while, but curing the pox reverted him to his evil ways. I'm curious about the Voodoo Lady's intentions, as well as the ending of this game. Just one more episode to go, folks. Thankfully, we realize now that Guybrush will reunite with Morgan in the afterlife. And hopefully the Marquis isn't there too. Guybrush is in the land of the dead TM, and the only good news is he got his hand back. This is home to the Crossroads, a place where pirates can choose how they want to spend their afterlife. Of course, Guybrush wants out of here, so he talks with the dead to find the items he needs to escape. And yes, Morgan is here too. LeChuck is the one that killed her, and she is very depressed about being dead. Guybrush lifts her spirits, and she's seemingly going to come back to life with him. However, Guybrush needs a sacrifice to leave, and Morgan volunteers to make amends with him. A rift of LeChuck's ship opens, and he uses this to take the energy from the land of the dead TM and becomes all-powerful. Elaine, after seeing Guybrush alive again, decides this is the time to break up with him and become a demon bride. Honestly, that's hot. Guybrush is missing a body, so he possesses his corpse and becomes a glorified zombie. Removing La Esponja Grande, Elaine reveals she was faking it and stabs LeChuck. He is half ghost as well, and he heads to the land of the dead for safety, only to be stabbed by Morgan. Guybrush sacrifices his chance of living again so LeChuck can be defeated once and for all. However, he has one more item in his pocket. While it seems like a stretch, and I personally thought it was stupid, his wife's wedding ring symbolizes everything he needs to return to the land of the living with his old body back and everything. He gives Elaine her ring back and have a happily ever ever. Are you joking? He gives Elaine her ring back and they have a happily ever after.
Actually, it's pronounced esponja with an H sound at the end.
Really? But we've all been saying esponja.
Yes, I know. It's been bothering me this whole time. I'm just telling you because I don't want you to look silly.
Oh, you're gonna get it for that.
However, our final scene is with the voodoo lady hiring Morgan to bring her the essence of LeChuck back to her. So she is evil then? Jeez. Also, Morgan Le Fay is now a ghost pirate hunter, which is a pretty incredible title. And that was all of Tales of Monkey Island. I know that took a while, and honestly, I loved it. This was an amazing modern take on the franchise, and I'm honestly sad Telltale never made a second Monkey Island game. Also, I'm pretty sure this game and Monkey Island 2 are the only ones in the series that don't actually feature Monkey Island. There were a ton of new characters along with the usual returning ones, but the only main ones to note are Morgan and Winslow. I know I didn't mention Winslow a lot because he doesn't impact the story very much, but he is extremely charming and funny. I loved Morgan as well. Not only was she a girl boss all the way through, but now she gets to be a ghost pirate hunter in the next game. Right? The Return to Monkey Island released in 2022 and saw the return of Ron Gilbert, the head of the first two games. While a lot of people probably see this as a good thing, I think it's the reason the game turned out as bad as it did. And yes, I'm sorry to say, Monkey Island did not stick the landing. I know, the gimmick is that all these games are great, and while this one could be considered good, yeah, it just is not close. I like it enough, and I don't think it tarnishes the series, but it is sad that the epic return wasn't so epic after all. This game came out 13 years after the previous one, and was published by Devolver Digital. I really like Devolver, and I'm guessing that had a big part in the series returning at all. Not to mention the change in art style. I think this is the first thing that people criticize. I honestly do like it, but yeah, I don't know how much of a Monkey Island art style it is. The characters have always been more traditionally realistic, even if they were stylized. Now it's almost completely geometric, resembling Paper Mario more than Monkey Island. It does result in some beautiful art though, I do have to give it credit. And it is different, so either way that's going to make some people upset. Ultimately I like it enough that I'm not bothered by it. The music is great, of course, as well as the voice acting. What's left? Oh yeah, I was kind of avoiding this part. The story. Here's some extremely crucial background you need to know. Ron Gilbert saw the last Monkey Island game as Monkey Island 2. Yeah, that basically meant to him that 3 to 5 do not exist. That disappoints me on so many levels. First off, there are tons of fans of these later games now. Who is this Ron guy to take that away? And how is he incapable of telling a satisfying conclusion of the story without completely ditching the characters and plots introduced before? The whole game, all I wanted was Morgan Le Fay just to show up as like a background character, but the only acknowledgement she gets is in the scrapbook page. They don't even mention Winslow, so consider yourself lucky. So if you remember what the ending of Monkey Island 2 was, then that's where we start. A couple of kids at an amusement park. However, their parents aren't actually their parents, and we soon find out this lookalike Guybrush is actually just a boy brush. Guybrush is an old man now, and the game's plot is just a story he's telling his son about the 30-year mystery of what actually is the secret of Monkey Island. I want to stop just to say a few things. First, perfect plot for the final game. Everyone wants to know the secret. It's a big plot hole. Can't wait to find it out. The other thing is, you may have noticed Guybrush has aged with the series throughout the story. Basically, the developers grew up as they made the games and just wrote about the things that were happening in their lives. So Return to Monkey Island is a story of Ron Gilbert's, Guybrush's midlife crisis. Got it. Welcome back to Melee Island, everyone, where we see the Lookout again for the first time in a long time. A lot of Melee is about seeing what's still there and what has changed. The Scum Bar is still there, but there are new leaders in charge. The governor's house is the same, but now Carla is the leader. Stuff like that. I think for a game with this premise, they did a pretty perfect job with Melee. There's a good amount of new characters and old ones. I already mentioned Carla, the new governor. There's also the jail with Otis, and Stan, the prison mate. I guess the sketchy businesses have finally caught up with him.
You look different somehow. New art style?
How nice of you to notice.
The House of Mojo TM is sadly going out of business, but the Voodoo Lady is still there, helping out as usual. We actually find out her name in this one. It's Corinna. Feels awkward to have called her Voodoo Lady for so long now. Think I'm gonna continue doing that as well. Wally's actually come back to Melee as a cartographer, so that's nice. He surprisingly does not hate Guybrush, which is impressive. And of course, Elaine is here as well. She's become sort of an activist, and her current fight is against scurvy. We'll see more about that later. There's a part on Melee that I see a lot of people hate that I figured I should mention. Guybrush needs a broom handle to make a broom, so he finds the perfect tree to get a branch from, but in the process he ends up destroying the entire tree and doesn't feel even a little remorseful about it. People say this is way too malicious for his character, and while it's fair, it's clearly a joke. Like, it is such a meaningless joke at the time, and yes, they kind of reference back to it later, but honestly I think people take this part a little too seriously. While we're at it, people seem to hate Elaine's personality in this one as well. I actually agree with his argument. She's always been a leader who doesn't take crap from anyone, including Guybrush. Now she's a loving pushover who lets Guybrush do things like destroy the home of countless animals without scolding him. I've always enjoyed how short she would be with Guybrush's antics, and it feels like she got super watered down here. Anyways, let's get on with the story. Our mission is to disguise ourselves and get onto LeChuck's ship, since he's heading out to Monkey Island to find the secret before Guybrush can. As a ghost swabby, we have to once again make the potion to locate Monkey Island. All that's missing is a flattened skull head. Oh, Murray. Glad to see you exist among the countless graves of sequel characters. Murray's fun though, I don't mind. Anyways, we murder him and use him on our potion. Well, long story short, the potion is ruined and we have to use a rival ship's potion to get there. Also, nobody on the ship actually wants to go to Monkey Island, so you have to convince them all to make the journey. I thought this was really fun, and there are a lot of clever puzzles that aren't too challenging, but not too easy either. A lot of it is dialogue based, and it all takes place on a ship, so there aren't too many rooms to get lost in. I loved it, and I was excited to see what was next. Sadly, I think Monkey Island is the weakest part, gameplay wise. Once we are there, we are tricked into performing a ritual to find the secret, only to find that it's actually on Melee Island the whole time. Guybrush gets kicked off the cliff, and while normally a rubber tree would bounce us back up, it has completely been chopped down. Elaine comes to our deathbed, and things don't seem too good, but then everything is perfectly fine and we make a ship and sail back to Melee. At this point, the world expands pretty insanely. Instead of one island to search, there are like 5 different islands and a couple of ships to traverse all at once. I honestly wanted the whole game to be like this, so I was pretty blown away at first. There's 5 keys you need to get to the secret, so you do a ton of puzzles across all the map. There is way too much to recap, so I'm not going to. Here are some highlights. You meet Elaine on a Lime Island who teams up with Stan for a marketing campaign. You actually have to break Stan out of prison on an icy island, while also becoming the queen and destroying their monarchy in the process. Guybrush meets Herman Toothbrot at the bottom of a cave, who I guess just isn't Elaine's grandfather anymore, by the way. And we actually end up leaving him there. There's also a secret club we must get initiated into, which I noticed while playing through originally, and liked the payoff quite a bit. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot more, and I won't bore you with the details. As Guybrush is about to open the chest, within the chest we just opened with those 5 keys, LeChuck steals it and goes back to Melee Island. Meeting up with Elaine one last time, she sort of confronts us on the horrible things we've done. Destroying that tree, leaving Herman Toothrot behind, leaving a broken monarchy and anarchy, all of that. Guybrush is so determined to find the secret that he's hurting people in the process. I think this is an amazing story topic that they could have leaned into more. After I tell you the end, I'm going to say what the ending should have been, but let's wrap up. Wally is kidnapped again, and if you were smart earlier, you can actually free him. Nothing cool happens if you do, but it is an option. Then you go into the final battle against LeChuck, reusing some items from your journey and breaking into the room, guaranteed to have our secret. It's another theme park. The treasure is a t-shirt. You see all of your friends, locations, adventure as cardboard cutouts. You turn the lights off and leave with Elaine. Boybrush is pissed with this ending, and you have the choice to say whether this ending means something, or if it's just a silly end to a silly adventure. Elaine teases that pirates are real, and the game ends. I think pretty obviously people hated this ending. I think starting the game with a continuation of the theme park ending people already hated, just to do it again was really stupid. Obviously Ron Gilbert likes the idea that none of these adventures are real for some reason. Alternatively, maybe they are real, but you're old and reliving your old stories in a play or a theme park. Either way, the secret of Monkey Island seems to somehow not have been completely answered. It's up to your interpretation if there's more to it, or if you think it's a t-shirt. I think this ending ruins the story for me in a lot of ways. As I mentioned before, I have a much better conclusion to the story. Here's what I think. Everything is the same, final battle finished, we're about to open that final door, and Elaine stops us. She tells us about the bad things that we've done, about the people we've hurt. Why did Guybrush do it? Because he's obsessed with finding out the secret. He's obsessed with one-upping himself, reliving the glory days, and being the best pirate ever. But at what cost? At the lives of others? The relationships with his friends? Is some treasure better than the people of Melee and every other island out there? Maybe then you make a decision. Leave Elaine and discover the treasure, only to be left with a t-shirt and the cardboard cutouts of all the friends you thought you had, Elaine nowhere to be found. Or, you go back to Melee with Elaine, leaving the mystery unsolved forever. Look at that, Ron. A YouTuber with about 12,000 subscribers took everything you set up, kept every detail the same, but rearranged it in a way that actually makes for a good conclusion to your 32-year-old series. You're an idiot, Ron Gilbert. I truly think that. Conclusions are tough, but you just gave me all the pieces you need to make a good one, while you disappoint a large portion of your community. To be fair, Ron Gilbert got a lot of hate from this game, specifically with the art style of all things. That's rough, and no one deserves that. I think a lot of fans just love the series so much that to see these poor choices be made is really hard. I've also seen a ton of love for this game, I can't lie. I still love it a lot. I genuinely believe this is the best gameplay any Monkey Island game has had. The puzzles are very fun and satisfying to solve, and the interactions with other characters are some of the best of the series. I only dislike the story, to be completely honest with you, which is strange considering I spent this whole video showing how good the story of Monkey Island is. How did they fail the one aspect they always were so good at? I don't know. Want to know what else I don't know? How do you end this video? Well, let's touch back on the premise. All Monkey Island games are good. They are good. If you like point-and-click games, then you're making a mistake by not playing them. If you have played them, then you're making a mistake by not replaying them. I know ranking stuff has been my thing, so if you're curious, then the first 2 games are S, then the third is B, the fourth is C, and the fifth is A, then the sixth is of course D. If I were to rank all 6 against other point-and-click games, most likely they would all be S, and everything else would be below them. That's just how amazing these are compared to the other games like them. I truly love these games that I first played less than a year ago. I hope and pray the series continues in some way, as long as it's good of course, and that more people will give the series a chance. I'm guessing this video got about 100 views by the way. Oh, it actually got less than that? Cool. My original intention was for this to be 20 minutes long, but apparently I was incapable of summarizing the story in less than an hour. I feel dumb, but that's like 10 minutes per game, right? It's not so bad when you think about it that way, right? Whatever, please let me know what you thought of this video. I suppose I've been wanting to cover the Plants vs. Zombies series as well, so maybe something like this makes more sense than a ranking video? Let me know. Thank you very much for watching, that means a lot. I will see you soon. Goodbye. I think for a game with this premise, they did a pretty good... I think a game for this... You gotta be joking. The lab is home to Le Marquis de Change.